Everything you think you know about the Exodus plagues might just be on the surface, especially the first plague, that water turning into blood. Stay with me. Let me share with you what you may have not thought about. You see, we always picture the water turning blood, but the first plague wasn't just about that, as if it was a miracle. It was calculated. God was making a statement. You see, the Nile wasn't just a river. It was the lifeblood of Egypt. Their calendar, their crops, their economy, and even their religion were all centered on it. The Egyptians believed that as long as the Nile flowed, their gods were pleased, and their kingdom would never fall. Egyptians worshipped the god called Hapi, the spirit of the Nile. By turning the Nile into blood, God didn't just inconvenience Pharaoh. He proved their mightiest gods were powerless to protect their most essential resource. In case you ask, why didn't God just make the water dirty? Why turn into blood? No, it wasn't enough to make the water dirty. It was not about hygiene. It was about justice. Dirty water would have just been seen as pollution or discomfort. It had to be blood. This is where the lesson gets deep. You know, earlier, Pharaoh commanded that all Hebrew baby boys be thrown into that very same river, and that law continued year in, year out. For every Hebrew woman, pregnancy brought sorrow, not joy. They knew what Pharaoh's law demanded, that the soldiers would come and the river would take another son. It was as though Egypt offered the Hebrews children as sacrifice to a false god. The Nile carried the blood of the innocent, and when God turned its waters to blood, it was not a miracle. It was judgment. The Nile itself bore witness against Pharaoh. The blood in the river was evidence, and with that evidence, justice was served. God's judgment was a mirror. He took Egypt's source of life and turned it into the symbol of death, making the very water testify against Pharaoh's crime. The first plague was massive. It forced everyone, Pharaoh, the Egyptians, and even the enslaved Israelites to acknowledge one truth. The God of the Hebrews is sovereign over nature, over nations, and over every false idol. Remember, God had said, "Against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment." That was his plan from the very beginning. So it shouldn't surprise us that the first false god he confronted was the one Egypt held most sacred, Hapi, the spirit of the Nile, right? Next time you hear about the Exodus plague, think about the justice of God on the Egyptian gods. God was indeed saying, "I will show you today who is in control." What do you think the second plague teaches?